Hello everyone, my name's Philip Brophy. I'm the director of the film Body Melt that I believe you're about to watch very shortly. Over there in maybe Los Angeles, I can't remember where it is being screened, but thanks to Patrick Hood that contacted me about doing this intro for the screening that I believe is in conjunction with the American Genre Film Archive and Contra Celluloid. As I said, I'm doing this on my phone from Melbourne. I'm not sure exactly what to do for the introduction for the film. It's a movie I made back in 1993. That's kind of like a long time ago, no matter which way you kind of cut it. The film, like probably so many films connected with AGFA, that end up being kind of rediscovered in some kind of way, probably weren't wildly successful, or at least wildly respected, upon their initial release. Sometimes they have been. In the case of Body Melt, it's kind of split globally. Here in Australia, where the movie was actually wonderfully supported by government investment, very forward-thinking people at that time there in the Australian Film Commission. And they were looking at promoting quote-unquote Australian identity, end quote. National identity really kind of sucks. The only people who really worry about it are people who are very insecure about their identity. You in the States, you don't have that problem. You're kind of like, you're a bunch of arrogant assholes when it comes to kind of what your cultural identity is, but that also has some great sides to it, some good sides to it. One of which is just an incredible legacy of movie making and cinema. And I've always loved genre films from America from a very young age. Like anyone else that's in a similar situation to me that gets to make a horror or genre film. You grow up on the stuff, you want to do something that's influenced by it and kind of gives back to it in some way. It ended up being kind of a little bit difficult doing that here in Australia because the remit of investment in culturally supported movie production here was all based on this kind of very liberal democratic kind of idea of building up Australian national identity through projecting images of Australians on the screen. Kind of good in theory, but from my opinion, from my personal view, all it did was just generate shitloads of really boring Australian movies. They're either quirky, they're dreadful caricatures of the working class, what we call bogans, what you might call trailer trash, and kind of just pretentious, you know. Not to mention just endless shots of the bloody outback. I mean, I hate the country, I hate nature, I got no interest in it. Plus, from a white Australian perspective, that land ain't yours, mate. It's the blackfellas' land. So celebrating it as a white filmmaker to me has always seemed kind of difficult. But anyway, I kind of tend to appreciate more the fucked up, messy, shittier sides of things. Not just to be negative, but just to kind of accept crap for what it is. And Body Melt, pretty much, it's a movie where the idea just came about from me watching, you know, the most mainstream network television with all its ads for insurance companies and sort of monetary investments and happy lifestyles for full families and all that kind of stuff, right? And I'm just kind of sitting back watching TV and just imagining every actor and every scenario that's being depicted there of just completely falling apart, of people kind of like suddenly getting chainsawed accidentally when they're in the hardware store, of a family kind of, you know, drinking drugged drinks and then dying and vomiting on screen. Just kind of random, harmless kind of happy thoughts like that. And just kind of thinking, after doing that for many, many years, thinking it'd be cool to watch a movie that actually had that stuff in it. And so eventually I ended up coming up with this idea for Body Melt that's basically just, shit that happens in the suburbs. Um, it's it's there just to kind of have that drive. It's not there to tell a story. It's not there to kind of make any comment on society in any way. It's just looking at a situation and calling it kind of for what it is, and in a sense using one's imagination to just push it a bit further. That's all. I guess, the clearest influences I'd have for this would be definitely, the first Evil Dead film, the kind of the approach that Sam Raimi kind of did, and just kind of running with this idea and pushing it to an extreme. But also, in a sense, I'm also kind of, I think, very influenced by filmmakers like Larry Cohen, particularly, The Stuff, God Told Me To, things like that. And, Frank Henlotter, who was kind of making things a little just bit before I was kind of making things. But even kind of smaller movies like The Gate, what was that other one? Even, like I Come in Peace, and The Hidden. These sorts of films that like kind of, they're not absolutely fantastic, but to me, they're kind of solid in some sense, right? And they're not kind of overreaching in what they want to do. And I kind of, with Body Melt, thought, well, I'm just going to keep it in the world that I know, and I'm not going to try and make some grand comment on the human condition. I'm not going to try and kind of work with actors in some amazingly complex, intelligent horror kind of way. I'm just kind of going to set these things up as if you're watching television more than if you're actually watching a movie. So I'm not sure how much that kind of translates to different cultures, but that was the kind of the aim behind the film. Some people think it's a riotous kind of comedy. I don't think it's a comedy at all. A comedy is something, I mean, I love lots of kind of comedies, but I hate comedians, and I particularly hate stand-up comedians. And then I really hate comedy movies that are made by stand-up comedians. It's like, dude, just go back into the club and, read the day's newspaper and say whatever kind of stupid jokes that are pretty obvious about topical kind of issues. So I'm really not a fan of that kind of approach to kind of comedy and whatnot. I much prefer the idea of humor being embedded in a situation. And, a lot of people, perceive things in pretty blunt ways when they're trying to articulate what it was they just saw. And so Body Melt often gets kind of summed up as being, a comedy type of film. But I remember, with lots of friends, at the time of kind of like probably the time of Return of the Living Dead and kind of films like that, that, we kind of were already by the mid 80s kind of bemoaning the fact that the more terrible aspects of horror that were really unsettling and really kind of interesting and visceral in that way were kind of like almost as a safety valve measure being diverted into comedic, absurd, over-the-top kind of situations. And Evil Dead, of course, is over the top, but it's also grounded in terms of its intent to horrify an audience. And to not do it as if it's a bunch of comedians that are making the film. So I guess it's a subjective point of view. People draw their own line as to what they find horrific and what they find kind of comic. I think maybe over time people have kind of worked out that Body Melt kind of isn't necessarily full-on comedy, but it's got lots of funny scenes in it. That's my personal view as the creator and director of the bloody movie, The only other thing I'll kind of quickly say is that my experience of Body Melt, it's kind of not a good one in some senses. It was great kind of making the movie, but here in Australia, it was like, ridiculously unsuccessful. To such an extent that, I couldn't get a single distributor to take the movie on. and it was this whole thing of like, oh, well, who wants to watch horror movies? And, oh, it doesn't have a very Australian feel to it. And also it's tasteless and it's not kind of, bourgeois middle class drama, which is what most stupid, boring Australian movies are. Back then, definitely, believe me, just look it up. And so we ended up having to distribute it ourselves, like four-wall it and put it into kind of cinemas and stuff like that. The story was very different overseas. Once you're doing something that's kind of got a clear genre base to it, those markets and fields and opportunities kind of open themselves up. And so, the film sold in Russia, Greece, France, Germany, India, England. Let me see. In, of course, the United States, Singapore, Japan. There's so many. It's sold to about kind of like 30 odd kind of territories. And I didn't really pay much attention to that at the time. That was all in the hands of international distributors and things like that. Until one day, someone alerted me, and so this is like in about like 2008 or 10, even something like that, right? Alerted me to the VHS. Sorry, I'll show you there, the VHS version of Body Melt, right, that is dubbed in Portuguese and completely rewrites the story to make out that the doctor in the film is actually a Nazi doctor and he's escaped from Germany and somehow is in Australia. I don't even know if they say it's Australia. Over in... when I found that out, I thought, I'm going to jump on eBay and see if there's like any of these other kind of, Body Melt, at that stage, VHS tapes. And lo and behold, I found, quite a few of them from all different kind of cultures and whatnot, including, I think, is that one there, France. It was called Body Trash in France. And they're all kind of like dubbed and everything with these kind of hilarious kind of voices and stuff. In India, where it got a theatrical release, they cut out 21 minutes of it. Obviously, all the kind of the body sex kind of parts of it, and then they wanted a discount on the sale of the film. So I ended up embarking on kind of following all these things through. And I did it in a very detached kind of way, because essentially I didn't even know what was happening with the film overseas. All I knew really is how it was received in Australia, and it really wasn't received well. So I then kind of became obsessed, and I felt a bit like kind of Russ Meyer you probably know that, Russ Meyer's house, prior to him becoming completely senile, unfortunately, his house was like a living museum. He had all the posters and every version of his film and things like that. So I kept on going and kind of kept on buying even more versions of Body Melt in DVDs, copies. And of course, Vinegar Syndrome ended up doing a Blu-ray, and just recently France did their Blu-ray of Body Trash. That scene, of course, is not in the movie. Schroeder Media did it in kind of Germany with, I think that's Schroeder Media, yeah, with a nice slipcase. So fantastic that all these kind of, as it ends up, smaller companies, have kind of done a re-release of the film. I actually embarked on a restoration of it, including reconstructing the 5.1 sound mix for the film back in 2017, and that's what levered these Blu-ray releases. So on my website, you can see it's got a documentation of all that kind of stuff and everything. So I guess I'm my own nerdy fanboy. But that probably also proves how kind of distant I kind of feel from it. It doesn't even feel like it's my movie now. It's just this kind of like weird movie that was made a long time ago, and it's like I'm now kind of collecting kind of versions of it. Fortunately, many years, in fact, probably in about like 1997, I was in New York and managed to get a copy of the Body Melt Laserdisc, which I'm extremely proud of, because any dead media, I think, is pretty cool. And at that stage, I remember going to Tower Records at, it was near Columbus, Columbus Circle in New York. And they had this massive display of all, like about 40 copies of the new release of Body Melt at that stage on VHS. I can't remember which company did that actually. Anyway, here we go. Yeah, so it was Prism Entertainment. Right, that scene, that image isn't in the film. That's actually from a cover of this. From memory, I think it might even be a Japanese jazz rock album. It's definitely a jazz rock album. And they just ripped it off and used it for Body Melt. But these kind of like weird chance encounters with something that you've made yourself, that's what I kind of found kind of fascinating with Body Melt. That I could kind of, go into a store in Tower Records in Manhattan and just stand there, and like not a single person there would know who the hell I was, and it's like, I'm thinking to myself, hey, I made that film kind of thing, and here it is, and people are all kind of buying it and renting it and stuff like that. So those kind of experiences, though they were few and far between, they were kind of quite opposite to how things were at the time in Australia. Of course, things have changed, and now, like, everyone and their uncle and their dead grandmother all say, oh, I've always loved Body Melt. Oh, yes, yes, yes. A fantastic kind of film. It's like, believe me, fuckers, I remember every single one of you that bagged the movie. And I have a list. So I'll be doing something with that in a very unsavory way at some other point. For now, I hope you enjoy the film. I shall just partake of a few. I'm not feeling too well, so I'll take a few of these wonderful tablets. I received them in the mail. They're meant to be pretty good. We'll see what happens. Enjoy the movie.